All right, Mike Morelli here from Peak Prosper, and I'm here with a good friend and mentor, coach, Timothy September. Tim has been someone who's had a profound impact on my life. He's a hypnotherapist, he's a coach, and Tim, I'm going to let you just give yourself your own intro in just a second. But yeah, Tim has been someone that's had a tremendous impact on my life, and it only seems fitting to bring him on for an expert interview so that Tim could really share a ton of just wisdom and knowledge. So without further ado, Tim, what's up, man?
Oh man, it thank you so much, Mike. Dude, like you yourself have been an inspiration. And I think if anything, this interview is definitely going to kind of show that because man, like you have inspired me as much as you say that I've helped, mentor you in whatever progression it is that you've been on in your life journey. And I really think that that is probably the biggest aspect of these types of connections is that we're helping each other, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted like my business, my company to be about, right? So I'm Timothy September. I am the kind of person that you would bump into, and then suddenly it's like, wow, who did this guy, end up, changing my life, even in a small conversation. And the world needs you now, which is the company that I built, is based around the client. It's about you, right? It's about helping you in your journey. And I do that through hypnotherapy. I'm a board certified hypnotherapist with the American Board of Hypnotherapy. And it is like one of the hardest boards to get into. But outside of all that, it's been such an honor to not only be able to help you with your journey, dude, but also be inspired by you and by the work that you guys are doing. So thank you so much for letting me hop on this interview.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and I think straight away, just for the listeners here, I think a lot of people maybe have heard of hypnotherapy. If they have heard of it and they don't have an understanding of it, I would venture to guess that a lot of people would think that you're sitting in front of me with a watch, and right, and you're getting me to like hypnotize and then do whatever that you want me to do, like you're controlling me, and I'm like your puppet.
Right.
Can you actually explain the truth about what hypnotherapy is and why it's so valuable?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a great question because you're right. There's this myth behind what hypnosis is, and a lot of those come from movies, cartoons, and the old folk tales that people may have heard. Eye fixation, which is where the whole concept of the pendulum or the watch that's dangled. Eye fixation is a huge principle in hypnosis. It helps you to be able to like relax the mind and really get them focused on something. And that's really the thing. It's that focus of attention. And so, in all reality, hypnosis is a natural thing that happens. It's not one person is this super powerful being controlling another person. It's actually a collaborative effort, right? There's I've never personally met him because he's in the UK. However, his name is James Tripp, and he runs a company called Hypnosis Without Trance. And the way that he describes hypnosis is brilliant, right? And he talks about this collaboration where it's both people kind of facilitating the belief around and the expectation of using the imagination to bring about a hypnotic trance. And what that means in like the easier, simpler terms is that it's an effort, right? It's not me controlling you. In fact, you all hypnosis is self hypnosis. So you're the only person who can hypnotize yourself. All the hypnotist is doing, and if I shatter anybody's dream of wanting to mind control people with hypnosis, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But all hypnotherapy is me giving you direction on how to get into a hypnotic trance. You're doing all the work, right? And I think, like Mike, with your experience there, you could say that that's pretty accurate, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely accurate. We've done, I think, has it been 4 sessions together now? And
Yeah.
um, it's guided meditation. That's if I could just explain it to like in very simple, like in a sentence, I would say to people, it's guided meditation. You guide me through a deep meditative experience where my brain is not, thinking and going nuts, and all right, and I'm able to get to the root and reprogram maybe past storylines that were causing me emotional stress and pain into something that I want. We're reprogramming the way that I want to show up in the world and the emotions that I want to feel. So it's, yeah, I would say it's been one of the most transformative things in my life, and it's just simply nothing to fear, or it's nothing to you were never controlling my mind or anything like that. So um
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You mentioned the guided hypnosis there, and that's actually it's close, right? Like it's very similar. The saying is that all meditation is hypnosis, but not all hypnosis is meditation,
Mhm.
right? Like we definitely have a lot of correlations, right? Like there's a this premise of relaxing and maybe sitting down somewhere where you can be comfortable. There's this thought of allowing the mind to kind of detach from the body, so to speak. And I think, to me, the major difference is, right, is that while there are different versions of meditation, like transcendental, mindfulness, loving kindness meditation, that kind of stuff, they kind of all do something similar, where it's you either focus on a mantra or you just allow, it focus on your breathing and allow the thoughts to come and go. And that's great, right? It's great to kind of have that self release. It's great to be able to, have stress relief and maybe
Mhm.
even get to sleep easier, right? It definitely helps in the long run. It's like oil changes for your car. However, if your car is needing to have major work done to it, there's only so much meditation can do.
Yeah.
And that's the separation, right? Is that with hypnotherapy, um, what we're doing is we're essentially allowing you access to that like super deep theta wave state, which is where you're trying to get to with deep meditation. However, we use certain principles of human physiology and neurology to get you there really quick.
Really
And
quick.
then and then we do hypnotic protocols. And it's the protocols that actually do all the change work, right? It's us basically guiding you through symbol, metaphor, um, in different guided imagery techniques that allow you to use your imagination to cause literal neuroplastic changes in your brain. Um, on a literal level, about every second you're generating 2 million new connections inside your mind, and they're all unconscious, right? Like when you discover like a new product, or if you see a color that you've never seen before for the first time, or whatever the case is, right? Every day you're creating new neural pathways in your brain, and everything is connecting and becoming hardwired and firing and rewiring, right? So when you do meditation, it's all like, you're here by yourself doing those oil changes. When something goes wrong, though, like you have trauma, or maybe you have a flashback from something that happened way back in your childhood,
Mhm.
maybe you rudiment, you have limiting beliefs, you have literally that wall, that plateau where you've been doing self-help courses or meditation, or you've been to therapy for years and years and been talking about the problem, and for whatever reason it never goes away, right? It's that plateau.
Yep.
Well, with hypnosis, the difference between guided meditation, what I would do is that I'm able to allow you access into that unconscious mind and give you specific tools that will allow you to release all that, to get rid of limiting beliefs, to give you a clean slate so that you can start making decisions, right? And I think, Mike, if I'm just being kind of blunt about this, right, the ability to choose has probably been the most powerful thing that you've had out of our sessions, right?
Yeah, and we can. I love how this conversation has started off. I think just you explaining what hypnosis is, the truth about hypnosis, really gives us a launch pad into this interview. It's going to be super powerful for a lot of people that listen to this. Um, and the ability to choose is everything. The ability to choose is everything. So you mentioned that, if you're someone that's experienced like trauma either in your life or from your childhood. So like that's why I started working with you, right? I had done so much meditation, I had done so much self-help stuff, worked with coaches, and all of those things have been amazing and very powerful. But I was just looking to get to the next step where, maybe some people don't have necessarily like deep trauma per se, but for me, I shattered my heel bone in a climbing accident. I've been through 3 surgeries. It's been incredibly traumatic, right? I had a massive like ego death about it. I also had some stuff go down in high school revolving like massive insecurities around women, right? That caused deep kind of like questioning myself, right? So those things were stories that were built on for years and years and years and years. And I think this really gives a good launch pad into kind of where this conversation is going to go today, but or where it could just naturally go. But you know,
Yeah.
we see so many people in life, and our niche is high performing adventurous men at peak prosper, where we develop a really strong sense of self, a very strong identity, and it feels very real because of these storylines from our past and these experiences that have a strong emotional connection. Right, this is how we form long-term memories, and then because of that memory, it replays in our head over and over and over. And what happens there, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm off base on any of this, but when these thoughts replay in our head, they develop the same emotions, right? Maybe
Mhm.
stress, overwhelm, anxiety. And because we human beings act on emotion, we start making our choices in life based on those emotions, based on those negative emotional drivers. And
Yeah.
then we experience the results in our life from those actions. And once we do that, we say, oh, well, this is just the way I am. This is the way I am because I've developed a personality based on these past experiences. And people are certain that that is the way that they are. And then it
Mhm.
becomes their identity. And that's why people
Yep.
say, I'm just a night person, or I'm not a morning person, or I'm an overthinker, right? We say these
Yep.
things and it's just an
Yep.
identity.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, we literally will attach whatever our storyline is with, with the label that we want to carry around with us, right?
Mhm.
Like you mentioned how while you went through some stuff, some people might not have that trauma. And here's the kicker, right? Is that it may not be trauma to you, or it may not be the same trauma, right? Like we can all judge each other for whatever, and then it just becomes you know this competition over whose trauma is worse, right?
Mhm.
Right. Ultimately, though, the real factor in all this is that it might be just a small thing that ends up expanding out into this giant thing, right? Like in my own personal case, I had my own insecurities around who I was when I was young, right? I was the fat kid, I was bullied, I had all these problems, right? And then you take that into now your adulthood, and while I haven't been bullied in, I don't know, like 28 years or whatever the case is,
Mhm.
because I haven't gone through that, that still didn't mean that I was good with women. That still didn't mean that I had, friends or whatnot that I got along with or trusted.
Mhm.
I still had to work through a lot of that. And so it was a small thing that ended up escalating into a bigger thing. And I think that's what a lot of people go through is because a lot of the clients I've seen, they will have a situation or a story that they will attach all this deep meaning to about who they are, and like their identity becomes it. And then I take them all the way back to the very first time that that thing ever negatively affected them, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the original like problem. For example, right, like one of my clients that I had, him and his wife were struggling in their communication. They were actually fighting almost every single day. And his thing was, right, and I'm sure there's a lot of men that might feel this way because of our societal conditioning, how we're brought up. He didn't feel like he was allowed to express his emotion. He didn't believe that he was allowed to talk about who he was, what he was going through,
Yeah.
how difficult his day at work was, right? So he would come home and just clam up. Here's the kicker, right? To anybody else, like a therapist or whatnot, they might talk to him about, okay, so these are some things I want you to do in your everyday life. I want you to change, how you start talking, how do the internal dialogue. Like I want you to start meditating, and all of that's great. All of that's fantastic. It probably would have got him really far, and then he would have hit a wall. This is why. So I put him deep into hypnosis, into what we would call a somnambulistic trance, which is like the working state of trance. It's like super deep. Like people have hypnotic phenomena, like their eyelids will flutter, their arms and or legs will be cataleptic. They'll have super deep breathing, right? Like, or they'll have like idiomotor signaling, and that can happen on a wide spectrum. But just to give, pardon me, just to give a real quick like general concept of what somnambulism is, it's super deep, like super, super deep. And so, put him in this deep somnambulistic trance, and he ended up going back to the very first time that he ever experienced this.
Mm,
Come to find out, he was 2 years old. He was 2 years old. His parents had taken him over to a family, like friend of the families or whatnot. They put him in this room all by himself. They were out having coffee, something like that. You know, it's a 2 year old. Like, what kind of problems could he get into?
mm,
He ended up finding a razor blade and cutting his hand completely open.
mm.
And as soon as he saw the blood, he starts screaming and hollering and yelling, and nobody heard him because they were all the way on the other side of the house. That trigger was the thing that set up his entire relationship problem. And he carried that with him all throughout high
Mm.
school. I mean, this was the shy kid. He couldn't, talk about who he was. And then suddenly now he comes to see me and realizes it was that moment when he was two, that one thing. So he had no idea. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, where you've done all the work, you've done absolutely everything, and yet things are still not changing. There's still no transformation. There's no result of where you're wanting to go, whether
Yeah.
it's money, relationships, your physical fitness, whoever you are. And then come to find out that the thing had nothing to do with it, right? Like, I think if anybody were to be able to connect with that, then it would definitely be those kind of people, like the ones who struggle with meditation or have reached that, like what you said, Mike, that like 20%,
Mm.
you're at that last 20%,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. And so this, I was wondering, Tim, if we could kind of like segue into
Oh,
this
yeah.
conversation on identity. And this is really a fascinating topic. We actually had a conversation about this kind of in the first, after the first kind of call me and you ever had together, and we were actually, it was recorded, right? And
Yeah.
you know, we see a lot of, really a lot of people in the world. And, again, a lot of times I'll just say men, high performing, adventurous men. It's who we work with at Peak Prosper. But just this is a human condition in general where, we really develop this strong sense of self, this strong I am identity, based on really just like the way that we've lived our life, because we can validate that. And, like, I think me and you, we have a bit of a different view on identity, and the fact that it's malleable. It can change. You actually can choose it. It's not like
Mhm.
God didn't like stamp you on the forehead when you were coming out of the womb and said, "This is the way that you are."
Right?
But
Yeah.
really, the world kind of goes in two different ways on that. There's one group of people that says, "Nope, this is the way that you are." Right? This is the way that you were born. The other group of people says, "Actually, nah, you can choose."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree that you can definitely choose. You can definitely choose. And if you are ever questioning like how you can tell what your identity is, it's anything that you would use with an I am statement. Like Mike was like, nail on the head with that. If you say like, oh well, I am XYZ, and most people will do this with their career, right? They'll say, oh, I'm a stock analyst. Oh, I'm a life coach. Oh, I'm a this, right? Like I even did it. I'm a hypnotherapist, right? It's something that I've attached my identity to.
Mhm.
And here's the problem that I think a lot of people run into, and we've talked about this, Mike, where people will get so attached to that label that if anything were to happen, their world shatters, right? Like I think in your case, it was like, I was this athletic person. I am this athletic person. And then suddenly you had to go through 2 years of surgeries, and that identity of who you thought you were supposed to be was suddenly shattered, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that caused really huge existential problems for me, because I was saying I am an adventurer, you know, I am a world traveler, I am a skier, and when that was gone, when for the last couple of years, nope, sorry, you shattered your bone. You're not doing that anymore. That
Yep.
challenged my sense of self. And that's when I really started to develop a lot of self worth issues and questioning who I was. Because when that's taken away, then who are you really?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think a lot of people go through that, right? They have something happen in their external world. They have an event happen in their life. Their girlfriend dumps them. They lose their job. Their business is struggling, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, like what's going on? This like challenge, it challenges the ego essentially, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely challenges, who you are or who you think you're supposed to be. Especially for men, right? Like I think with men, it's really difficult or has been really difficult growing up, whether you're from the Midwest or I really don't think that there's a geographical thing here. I think it's just in general, we're starting to reach that paradigm where men are coming out and saying like no, like I'm done having to put it all in a container, right? Like I want to talk about how I feel. I want to be perceived as, just a human regardless of the label,
Yeah.
right? And that's the thing, it's a label.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's a stamp that we put on ourselves because we want society, whoever society is, whatever that is, we want them to be able to notice us for something more than just, our face and our physical self, right? Like,
Mm.
and when part of that's, somehow damaged in one way, shape, or form, like whether that's, a person who puts all of their who they are into their business and then it tanks, or their relationship and then it, goes out the window. I mean, it could be your family, like whether you're a parent who puts everything into their children. And I mean, there's so many ways that this affects people that they're completely unaware of,
Yeah.
that it can be really distorting to your reality when a part of that's taken away. And it is that attachment to the label. And that's because that thing will drive you every day. Like, so there's this concept called Dilt's logical levels, which literally explains from the bottom up how a person will typically look at themselves from a self view, right? And I think we talked about this. The very top, very top part of it, if you imagine it's like a pyramid or a triangle, the very top part of it is spirituality and stuff. And so I really don't talk much about that, because for everybody that is a very that's a very subjective, or I'm sorry, it's a very objective viewpoint. I mean, it's all going to be different no matter what. However, right below spirituality is identity. And these are the I am statements you use. And this is the very top level for almost everybody, because outside of spirituality, I mean, you have to believe in something higher, or else I wouldn't be able to help you with that. Right.
Yeah.
But from identity down though, like that'll carry all the beliefs and the values you have around your identity, what you feel you're even capable of, the way that you behave, and even the environment you're willing to put yourself in. And so through Dilt's logical levels and an understanding of the identity and who a person could be, you can get a really good sense of them based on, the type of people that they carry with them, the way that they talk about themselves, the way they talk about other people, the way that they view themselves from a like a societal view, like where do they put themselves in their own hierarchy? Like just through conversation, you can really get a sense of who a person's identity is. And in our line of work, like Mike, you coach high performing men, and then me, I do hypnotherapy for people who might have compulsive behaviors, who may have intrusive, obsessive thoughts over
Yep.
something. And we get to the root of the problem,
Yep.
and oftentimes the root of the problem is their attachment to this thing that they think they have to be.
Yeah.
And that's not the case at all. You get choice in that,
Yeah.
right? Like if it was just a label on a whiteboard and you got a chance to wipe it away and put something else, what would you put? And there are so many people, and I'm sure you know this too, who are like, oh well, I have to put I am a doctor because my parents said so, when really they want to do something else, right? Like, oh, I have to be a multimillionaire because society tells me I'm not successful unless I am.
Yep.
And like I said, this plays into so many avenues of our life that most people I don't think are even aware that they are being manipulated by this label.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in right here because now we got the ball really rolling on this thing. And so I can hear people right now listening to this saying in their head, well, what am I supposed to choose? I would say that most people, and this is not a judgment, just the way that kind of the world works, we're going through life asleep at the wheel. We're unconscious. And so a lot of people will hear this and say, well, okay, well, I'm going to choose. But if you're not aware, if you're not awake to the fact of how society has been programming you for your whole life, like Tim just said, I have to be a millionaire because that's what society told me to be successful. I have to be a millionaire if I want to achieve financial freedom. I'll put my hand up right now. Financial freedom is a goal that I will achieve in my life, but I don't need to be a millionaire to achieve it. It's just as much internal as it is external. So when we are developing this new identity, we have to gain some clarity. We have to get out of our head. And this thing is like spinning and it's telling us all this stuff about who we should be. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and she was saying to me that, I don't know. I don't know what I should be, right? I don't know I don't know what I want. And we put so much pressure on ourselves because, society, the way that we've been growing up, and this isn't like society, man.
Right.
It's not, well, I just say society because it's the consciousness of the world is saying,
Right.
go to school, get a job, get good grades, work hard, save for retirement. And that's obsolete, right? That
Mhm.
just because the majority of people are doing that and saying that doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you. There is no path, right? There is no,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I'm going to figure it out and then walk this golden staircase to the summit. That's not the way life goes. We have to at least first gain some mental clarity about who we are, who we want to be, and then once we do that, things will organically fall into place for us. We can develop this, all right, this is what I want. And now I know that I need to be this identity. I can choose this identity because it lines up with these set of goals or the vision that I have. That's at least what
Mhm.
kind of Scott and we really think that that's like a kind of a powerful way. And I think, I would love to hear you just kind of speak on that, like this. Essentially, Tim, I just went on a little bit of a ramble there, but essentially speaking on the fact of like gaining clarity and like eliminating the noise from the world of telling you who you should be. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So in my own personal experience, and I'm sure, like Mike, you'll agree with me here. The very first thing that I would suggest to anybody, if they're like, "Yo, like I okay, I'm listening. How do I become aware? How do I do the damn thing?" Right? A part of my French, but I mean, really, like,
totally.
I'm like they're like, I'm ready to do it. Well, I think the first step is limiting the time that you spend around technology. Right? Like, take a day or two away from social media. Take a day or two away from your Instagram, away from YouTube, and really just think. Whether that's writing down in a journal or maybe you vision board, like whatever. Like, I'm being serious. Probably the most therapeutic thing you could do is probably go camping for a weekend. No electronics, no nothing. Go
100%.
out in the middle of go out into the middle of nowhere, take your shoes off, put your feet literally on the ground for hours on end and just think. And right there will get you so much clarity and focus, because instead of the outside societal constraints, it'll allow you the ability to be more aware of who you are without that noise, right? Um, and if you want that next step, let's say you're doing that, you're like, all right, Timothy, I'm going camping right now. Like, what's the next step? So you want to get rid of the noise in your head. There's this really awesome technique that you can do, and it works with something called submodalities. And the submodalities in your brain essentially are the way that your mind encodes and decodes memories. Right now, I want you to think about something you absolutely love, maybe a really good memory, something happy. And when you do that, you'll either have some type of like visual, like a picture or a moving, like a movie reel. You probably have some type of audio, maybe like a voice, or you can hear like, some type of dialogue, or maybe you just straight feel an emotion and you can feel it somewhere on your body. So much so that if you were to look for the emotion, you can point to it. Either of those, whatever the case is, your brain is doing that through the modalities of either the visual, the auditory, or the kinesthetic representational systems. These are the way that you not only remember things, but it's also how, when you want to pull a memory up, that you remember it. And so what this means is that if you picture a color like a red apple and you see the red apple, you can identify with what the red apple is. We're about to make a full circle here. Stay tuned. So you can see what the red apple is. However, if you were to change that to a blue apple, would it have a different feeling? Would it have a different emotion attached to it? So when you're looking at your memories from this aspect of like, okay, so if they're just like the way that I see things, like maybe it's black and white or colored, or maybe it's really big or really small, or if you hear things, it might be the volume's really loud or really low. It sounds like really heavy bass, or maybe it's just like a light speaking voice, whatever the case is. There are going to be little nuances that are unique to every single person. So, if you want to get rid of the noise in your head, first you have to be able to identify what it is. Is it a picture? Is it a dialogue, or is it an emotion? And then when you do that, I want you to intentionally change something about it. So if it's a picture, I want you to, in your mind, use your imagination, quite literally, use your imagination and push it super far away, like super, super far away. If it's audio, I want you to imagine that you can turn it all the way down and then turn it all the way down. And if it's a feeling or an emotion, use your imagination and pretend that in some way, shape, or form, you pull it out of your body and maybe you like throw it out the window or something. And then I want you to start thinking about something that you would rather have. So you got rid of the noise. Now we need to replace it.
Mm.
So now think about something that you would rather have. Like maybe you want to go to Africa, or maybe you want to, become an airline pilot, whatever the case is. Think about that thing and then add some aspects of cool stuff to it. Like if you're a visual person, then maybe add a lot of color to it. Make it really bright and vivid so it's like wow in your face. If it's audio, maybe crank the volume up, change the way that the pitch is and the timbre. If it's an emotional type of thing like a kinesthetic, maybe inject like your favorite memory into it, or something that makes you feel really good like a puppy or a kitten or something, whatever the case is. Your unconscious mind would know best, so you would be the one to put it in. It's going to be unique for every single person. When you do that, you will get rid of the noise and you'll be able to start focusing on the things that you want most. And how it works is through submodalities. Your brain is literally encoding and decoding your sensory organs and the way that you perceive memory through this stuff. So by changing it and manipulating it, using your imagination in your mind, you will immediately start making new perceptual changes both internally and externally.
Mm.
Things won't have the same flavor of lemon, so to speak. Like if you wanted to change the flavor of a lemon, you through hypnosis, I would just take you in, have you, change the color of it, maybe have you dial back the way that you would normally sense how it tastes. And then by doing that, quite literally, you are changing on a neurological and a biochemical level. You are changing the way that you would start to understand and perceive that thing, whether that's, having the noise in your head that won't stop, or maybe the image or the movie reel that you can't get to slow down. Changing the submodalities allows you an immediate access into the way that the memory is encoded. And so that is probably one of the quickest ways to do it. I know that
Yeah.
was long winded. I appreciate the patience.
No, no. I was actually just kind of sitting there and just taking that in. And this is why we shoot these. Well, this is actually the first interview that I've shot, the first expert interview, but this is why it's so valuable to tap into someone. I mean, that tool right there, super powerful. Someone can go and pause this video and then go do that literally right now. If you are actually
Mhm.
someone right now you probably should just be off technology in general, just
Right.
go pause this and just go lay down in your room and go do that. Go do that right now.
Mhm.
I do these types of Tim, you taught me essentially self-hypnosis, these visualization experiences where I attach emotion to it and really visualize what I want. Like what I do want,
Mhm.
rather than
Yep.
focusing on, what's missing, what's wrong, what are the problems, right? And it's been powerful. I mean,
Mhm.
I just do it every day now. It's just a part of my it's a part of my routine. And these
Yep.
tools and techniques and strategies and principles, they work. They really, really, really work. And over the last few years, I've just pretty much become obsessed about really understanding the mind. And this thing, it's either going to be your servant or your master. You choose.
Mhm.
You choose. But I
Yep.
know that when I've been the servant, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed out, I'm negative, I'm
Mhm.
anxious, I hate people. Sometimes I'll hate myself, right? Like, you know what I mean? You
Yep.
buy into the negative consciousness of the world and you fall into line and just, you know, I guess this is what I just have to do. You know what I mean? Where when this thing becomes a master, right? You can master your life. You can do the things that you really want to do. And then also show up from a place of feeling like love and peace. I mean, for me, it's like I'd much rather feel like loving and peaceful than stressed out and negative. I've been on both
Yep.
sides. I've been on both
Yep.
sides. And this
Yep.
thing, There are the tools and strategies out there to significantly improve your life and get what you want. And I think that's why I love talking to you, Tim, because um, you can do it. You know what I mean? You can do it. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely I love what you said there about how you it can either be the servant or you can be the master of it, right? And I think a lot of people they don't really understand this. However, I'm going to let a little secret in for all the people who are wondering about like marketing and advertising and stuff. There's a hypnotic principle that is create an emotion, give a suggestion. I won't go into detail about how it works or why it works or what it is. Just know that anytime you are put into a position of a changed emotion, like if you can imagine the movie Inside Out from Pixar, are we allowed to say that? Like, yeah, no sponsorship here.
Monsters
But
Inc.
no, right, right, yeah, say it. No, so Pixar they created this like movie about Inside Out, which is like where each of these like little tiny characters are like that person's emotion, and they kind of like jump on the controls and take things over, right? Well, there is this concept called parts therapy. It's either called ego state therapy, parts therapy, resource therapy. There's so many different names for it, but it's all essentially the same, right? Is that each of us have parts. You have a part of you, for example, that tells you when you're hungry. You have a part of you that tells you, hey, like it's time to go to bed. You have a part of you that is probably different from the way that you would interact with, maybe like your pet, like dog or cat, and the way that you'd show up to work. Right, like you wouldn't want the one that loves all the puppies and rainbows and everything to show up if you're like an executive CEO or something like that, right? Like, of course. So we each have these different parts. Well, when you create an excited emotion in somebody, whatever that part is that is most relative to that is going to be the one that shows up, right? So, for example, this is where the whole concept of like attaching an emotion, like what Mike was mentioning earlier, attaching an emotion to something that you want in the future. The reason why is because there's a part of you that wants that. And the more good things you stack on top of it, the more resources that you give that part, the more apt it is to actually go into that control center of your mind to help you guide you along the path and journey you want, right? So for some people, the negative emotions are a lot stronger than the positive ones, and those are the ones that are in control. And so nobody in this world wants to go to bed angry, and nobody wakes up like, I want to know how angry I can be today. Like, like nobody does that. Like, it's so taxing. It is so taxing to be mad at something all the time.
Oh,
And there are so many people who are doing it right now who 5 years ago, some guy said something to them that has just set them off. And now that's the only thing they can think about. And that guy probably has no clue
yeah,
that he set you off on a 5 year tangent of oh
yeah,
shitsville. Like, right? Like
totally.
the problem is though is that a lot of us will fixate on that thing, and that ego state, that part shows up and takes full control, right? So when we're talking about identity and attaching an emotion to it, right? When marketing and advertising people, to come full circle, when marketing and advertising people put out sensationalized headlines that immediately strike a nerve with you, make you mad, make you fearful, make you feel guilty, they are prying on some of your most primitive ego states, some of your most sensitive parts, because those are the parts of you. Those are the parts of you that have yet to be healed from childhood. Those are the parts of you that are the easiest to grasp a hold of because most of us have not had the ability to sit down in a wooded forest somewhere out in the middle of nowhere with our feet off. We've been behind a desk, even since before COVID. We've been behind a desk for damn near 80% of our work week, working for someone else, hating our life. I mean, this is a majority of America. This is a majority of my clients where,
80% of Americans
like,
report hating their job.
right? And so we don't have the time, especially because wages, there's such a huge discrepancy with wages. There's, a huge discrepancy with people's health. Like, so overall, when a marketer or advertiser puts up that sensationalized headline, they know that if they say, hey, you're ugly, buy our product, you are more than likely going to allow that part to jump in and go, I should probably buy that product because they're reminding you of something that you're insecure about, something you judge yourself on. They're prying on you. And so,
And Tim,
you
just real
know,
quick, just
yes,
I'll just jump in real quick. If anyone's sitting here saying, "Well, what news would that be?" All news,
all all
news,
news.
all news.
It's just news. Like, you know, like this person shot dead in your neighborhood 5 years ago, and now you go, "Oh, that's scary." And then suddenly it's like, well, they're probably going to feed you something like, "Oh, we need to support this thing or that thing, or
Yep.
we need to do this or vote for this person." Like,
And then you take it on, and you're
and then
like,
you
now
take it
you're like
on,
virtuous about it, and it's like
right?
your identity. And then it's like,
Yeah.
I stand for this, you know. And
Yep.
then
And then
anything that goes against that, which could have some validity, by the way,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
are anti that, and then you're anti those people, and then you become judgmental, and then you become the very thing that you said that you didn't want to be in the first place. So anyways, keep going, but that's the way
Yeah.
it works. That's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's literally how it works. That's why people can become so like, volatile when their sports team loses. Like it's like when their sports team loses, suddenly now they're flipping cars, they're setting houses on fire, and it has absolutely nothing to do with them. It has to do everything with their identity and the fact that there's probably something from their past that they are fearful of. Oh, like, oh, I have to identify with this team because I wasn't good enough in football, or because I don't have enough money because I'm not with the like. There's so many I wants, and then they'll attach an identity to something that has nothing to do with it because it helps satisfy some intention
Yep.
that's there, right?
Yep.
And so coming full circle now, the parts in your identity, you can still change those. You have a choice in this. So even though you might have a part that's fearful, I mean, imagine it's like a 5-year-old you, right? Like every time like that fearful part of you comes out, or the judgment part, or the guilty part, right? Imagine it's like a 5-year-old you that shows up with their little blankie and their teddy bear, and they're looking at you like mom and dad. And it's like, hey, like I'm really afraid that that might happen to my kids one day. Or like, hey, I'm really afraid that if you did this thing that you wouldn't love me anymore, right? What would you say to your son or daughter if they came to you and said those things? It would probably the most loving, compassionate, kind, like self-worth, like you are worthy of anything you want talk. You would probably win a Nobel Peace Prize for the speech you gave that child,
Yeah.
right? And then yet when that part, that you comes to you and it needs that aid, and you just pitch it to the side, or you decide, what, I'm going to go ahead and just go get drunk with the boys tonight, or I'm going to go ahead and, drown my sorrows in video games or gambling or food or whatever it is. When you do that, you're literally pushing that 5-year-old to the side and saying, I'm too busy for you right now. And what happens is, to go full circle with like what Mike mentioned about that pressure valve, what happens is that every single time you kick that 5-year-old you out and say, not right now, they will come back and they will remind you of that time and every other subsequent time that you've done that.
Yep.
And that'll become that voice in your head.
Yep.
And then that 5-year-old you will start throwing a tantrum and things will get bad. And that's when your life starts going downhill. And yet the same pattern gets repeated, where suddenly now you identify as this bad person or this thing that happened
Yeah.
5, 6, 20 years ago. And suddenly now there's a marketing or an advertiser who is reminding you of your identity. Society is reminding you, social media is reminding you. And then suddenly you're on this negative spiral down where you don't even know who you are, because who am I if not this 5-year-old?
Yeah.
This thing that happened. How can I rise to want all these things if I'm not even this 5-year-old?
Yeah.
Suddenly now you're in despair. And that's when you would seek someone like Mike or me out, right? And that's because we know on a deep level, we just have to get you to talk to that 5-year-old
Yeah.
and to have them let it all go.
Yeah.
Just let loose.
Yeah.
Because once that happens, that pressure valve literally will pop open and you will feel this lightness that you've never felt before.
Yeah.
And that's because what's happening is your brain is attaching your identity of yourself now or anything in the future to that past event. And that is taking energy. That is taking so much energy.
It's exhausting.
Imagine if you If your brain was working as hard towards your goals as it is thinking about that conversation with Bill 5 years ago that really pissed you off, right? Imagine how powerful, how much awesome your life would be. Imagine how awesome your life would be if 5 years, all that time you spent from 5 years ago thinking about that stupid shit, if suddenly now it's 5 years in the future and the only thing your brain thought about is how much money can I make? How awesome can I become? Who can I inspire? What things can I do with my life? How many people can I impact? There are so many things that if your brain, using all that energy, thinking about 5 years ago, put itself into use instead, just think in 5 years how much you would accomplish. Think in 5 years how much you could accomplish if all that energy was going into something more
Yeah.
than what it is right now, right? And the only way you can release that pressure valve, the only way is by accessing the unconscious mind, because that is where all your past memories, your beliefs, the way that you view yourself, your identity, the way that you perceive your past, those conversations that you've had that you just can't seem to get rid of, that 5 year old you lies in your unconscious mind. That little 5 year old you, that part of you that just wants to be heard, is actually, and this is from Jay Watkins and Watkins, Paul Verdern, these are psychologists, Dr. Gordon Emerson, these guys are legit psychologists, doctors who have wrote about this. Quite literally, that 5 year old you, that part of you that just needs healed, is hardwired into your brain.
Yeah.
There is a physical structure they could follow, that those neurons, those specific clump of little pieces of whatever in that meat that you call brain, there's a physical structure that when it fires, that is that 5 year old part coming out and saying, hey, look at me. There's some signal going on. I need attention. I need help.
Yeah.
And then you push it to the side because of XYZ,
Yeah.
right? It's you. You have to heal that part of you. And the only way you can do that is by accessing the unconscious mind. When you do, and you run the protocols, you have the right technique done for you, like suddenly it's like that pressure valve. Boom. All that energy that was stored from holding on to that
Yeah.
bullshit gets released. And now for everyone who's like, oh my gosh, so but what if I don't have the motivation or the inspiration? Where do you think that is? That's all the way back here that you've been holding on to. Like, you gotta let that go, because when you let go of the attachment to who you were, you suddenly are given a clean slate to choose who you want to be, because now you have the energy to do it. You now have the energy to perceive life from a completely different realm of, I didn't even freaking know that that was a possibility.
Yeah.
Because you've let go of the story. You've let go of who you thought you were. That 5 year old you is now healed. That physical structure in your brain can now be utilized for something even better. And on top of that, you've accessed the unconscious mind, meaning that it'll be easier to get into because it's a skill. Once you've been in trance once, you'll be able to go back there immediately because it's a skill that you learned to do that you've been doing your whole life. Whether that's, having highway hypnosis where suddenly you daydream and don't know how you even got home. When you watch a movie and suddenly 2 hours pass by, when you're doing your favorite activity and get into flow state, all of that is a trance-like state.
Yep.
So now that you're aware of it, you can start finding more ways and easier ways to get there. Because it's there that you're in the unconscious mind. And at that point, it's like, as Anthony Jackman would say, reality is plastic. So it's at that point that your brain becomes neuroplastic and you can change what you want. Oh, man.
On fire. On fire.
Whew.
That was hot fire. That was really, really, really important. And I would challenge anyone that's listening to this right now to go back and listen to the last 5 minutes, because that is life-changing information. The goal here is to achieve consciousness. You need to become a conscious person, right? Right. And for a lot of us are just unconscious. And I'll just say one quick story too. Well, actually, this is just want to make sure here. I could potentially hear people right now saying like, so like everything is from my childhood. Like, so I have to now I have to go and analyze like me, like 5 years old. That's not necessarily what you mean, correct? You're just using that as an analogy of a specific
Right.
time period in life where something happened to you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the story I mentioned earlier about the guy having the memory from when he was 2.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody, I'm sure it would be difficult for you to think of a memory from when you were 2. However, his unconscious mind was holding on to that,
Yeah.
and it was easily to be accessed because of the energy attachment to that thing.
Yeah.
For you, it might have been, oh, this thing happened when I was a teenager, or
Yeah.
maybe I got into a car crash when I was a late adult, and that's suddenly still the thing that you hold on to. Whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's always going to be a 5 year old. It's going to be some part of you that gives a signal because that's all your body does, right? If you step on a Lego, because Legos freaking hurt, if you step on a Lego, your body goes, hey, that's painful, right? You put your hand on a hot oven, it goes, hey, that's painful, right? It's a signal. It's just feedback. And so if you start looking at the negative stuff that's going on in your mind, right? Like somebody says something mean to you 5 years ago. I keep using that example, but whatever. It's like, oh, what am I talking about? Does he have problems? But no, like whatever
Yes.
the case is, you're right. Yeah, it's whatever the case is, if you're thinking about it continuously, if it's a thought that just doesn't seem to go away, you're giving it attention and you're putting your energy there and you're holding on to that thing. So that could be from anything. I mean, it could be, like I mentioned, a car crash, something traumatic, whatever the case is, it's just a signal. It's your job because it's you. Like who else is it, right? You are going to know what your signals are. And so it's just like Mike mentioned, being a conscious being, being self-aware and aware enough to be self-aware of what's going on in your mind. Instead of just letting the monkeys out loose, right? You gotta put them in order. Say, okay, so why am I thinking of this thing? Not so much the why, because why can keep you stuck, but instead use a what caused this thing to happen. Use a what or a how, a processing question. So what caused this thing to happen? Because when you're aware of your triggers, you can start figuring out the puzzle pieces of how that maybe showed up.
You can rework
And
this thing to the way that you want it to be rather than just allowing the system to just run unconsciously.
yep,
I will
bingo.
just share a kind of a closing note here to tie this all in. Um, there is a guy in our program, in our transformation program, and he was following that pattern that you're talking about. Make some growth and then hit that plateau and then drop back down, and then make some growth, hit that plateau and drop back down. He couldn't figure out why is this happening. And on one of our live calls, I broke it down for him essentially, right? So he had these, he would make growth. And he's like, dude, when I'm making growth, I feel awesome. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling successful. I'm working towards my goals. And then he goes, I always like sabotage myself back down. And I'm like, I just can't understand why. And I said, what do you have against successful people? He goes, what do you mean? I said, what do you have against successful people? And he goes, he goes, well, it's like successful people are confident and that's someone that I want to be. But like my mom always told me when growing up that, never be confident. You never show confidence because confidence that's what cocky people do. And cocky people are never successful. Right. And so every time that he wound up making growth in his life, right,
Mhm.
he would start to feel confident. And because he has that internal judgment, he judges successful people for how they show up in the world.
Yep.
Subconsciously, he sabotages himself back down to where he thinks he should be. And then you hit that bottom level and you get all freaked out again. So you got to grind back up to the top, but he couldn't break through
Right.
that plateau level. And this is exactly what Tim is talking about here. These limiting beliefs that come from these storylines from our past, but we take them on as real. And it's like our identity, right? And it's like, no, well, I can't be that guy because of, I'm not that guy because blah, 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 right? Come up with all these excuses and storylines, but they're just stories. Like they're
Yep.
literally just stories that we get fed to us either from the media or from our parents. And I love my parents. Parents are amazing people, but the point of this is that you will be programmed whether you're aware of it or not. And the key is to
Mhm.
be aware, right? And when people can say things to you, and then once you're aware, you're saying, no, I don't need that. Like someone says, oh, you're ugly. Well, okay, whatever, let it go.
Yep.
But if you're unconscious and then you say, someone says to you, hey, you're ugly, and then you take that on, oh my God, I am an ugly person, right? And it sucks. And you feel that pain and that sadness on the inside, the emotions. And then that becomes your identity. Well, maybe I am an ugly person. And then you look for experiences in your external world to validate that. Oh, that girl didn't look at
Absolutely.
me. I looked at that girl and smiled. She didn't look at me. I am ugly. And then you're just
Hmm.
programming yourself. And
Absolutely.
this conversation gives people, I really hope that this conversation gives people some huge breakthroughs. Um, Tim, you've shared some incredible knowledge and wisdom. And I will just ask this final question here is where can people find you? Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about what you do and maybe how you could help them or even just a chat? Like, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate the ability to, kind of pitch myself here.
Totally.
Quick note, you're 100% right about that unconscious thing. I mean, that's why like children are so easy. Like you could tell a child, and this is from my mentor, Mike Mindell, You can tell a child to go out and look outside in the hallway because there's a dragon that has candy. And you know, as an adult, there's no dragon out there with candy, right? But you tell a
Mhm.
5-year old that, they probably believe it. Well, what happens is that children are so malleable between the age of 0 and 7 during that imprint stage because they're looking to their parents, they're looking to their peers, their uncles or cousins, whoever, to give them validation of who they are, right? This is the early stages of building that identity. And they're all it's completely unconscious when they're doing this. They have no clue. Most of them struggle with remembering, or even acknowledging that they have an ego or an identity or anything like that. So that's why a lot of people, when I talk about childhood trauma, a lot of people have these issues in their childhood, and that's because of that unconsciousness that young children seem to have, where they do take stuff on as though it's reality. And that's why we question it going way into the future as an adult, because suddenly now we're going, well, where did I learn that? And it's all learned. That's why you can unlearn this stuff too. Going from unconscious to conscious, you're literally unlearning how to be what society programmed you to be, and
Mhm.
instead you're becoming the person that you want to be through
Yep.
your own internal programming, right? And so if this resonates with you, if you would love to speak to either Mike or myself, because Mike is incredible. If you haven't had the chance to talk to Mike, you need to talk to this guy. He will change your life, especially if you're an adventurous, a high achieving, high performing man. If you love to climb, love to bike, if you love to do awesome, adventurous stuff, talk to this guy. He will change your life.
Thank you.
Um, and if you want to work on unconscious stuff, whether you have rudimenting, like, uh, you know, super like upsetting thoughts about who you are, if you give so much time and energy to your past or past thoughts, if you have a compulsive behavior, maybe you pick at your eyebrows, or if you struggle with having social anxiety or whatever the case is, because there's probably something that you have no clue how to fix. You're at that 20% and it's like, geez, I just wish this thing would go away.
Mhm.
I'm the person you need to talk to.
Yeah.
You can find me at theworldneedsyounow.com. You can also find me at timothyseptember.com. That website will be launching fairly soon. The World Needs You Now is my main uh, placement. So just theworldneedsyounow.com. If you want to talk to me on Facebook, add me as a friend. I would love to talk with you. You can find me at facebook.com/TimothySeptember86. Again, that's facebook.com/TimothySeptember86. And once again, Mike, dude, thank you so much, man. You are an incredible human. Like, you're one of my favorite humans. You're so inspirational, and I'm so stoked I got a chance to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Right back at you. You definitely have had a profound impact on my life for sure. So profound. Yeah. So thank you so much. You dropped some serious knowledge bombs. I'm glad that we did this today, man. I really am. And don't forget, people, just breathe. All right. Please
Just breathe.
breathe, breathe, and go in the
Breathe.
woods.
Yeah, man. Put your feet in the ground. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, that stuff is so therapeutic.
Yeah, right on. All right, Tim, let's wrap this one up here. And again, thank you so much for your time and wisdom, and happy days always.
Happy days.
All right,
See ya.
peace.